Hi, this is EWI lesson number 2. Hopefully you've already watched EWI lesson number 1. And we're going to move on to some little tips and tricks, hopefully, about getting started on playing the EWI really well. Now, the pads on the EWI don't actually move, they are touch sensitive. So one of the first things to get used to is the fact that we've got to be quite neat with our fingering. I think it's really good discipline for saxophone players. We want to make sure that we don't accidentally touch any of the little finger keys or the pads that we don't mean to touch. So we've got to be quite positive and accurate with our fingering. Now, most people get used to that pretty quickly. It might seem a bit odd, but most people don't find that a problem. People do find the octaves on the back a problem, and we're going to look in the lesson 3 about ways of setting the EWI up that could actually help you out there. But I just wanted to share a few things with you about this technique on the left-hand thumb. Now, it's a good idea to use your thumb, I think, in 2 different ways. If you're going to cover the octaves pretty quickly, then I find with my thumb that sometimes I'll want to lean slightly, so it's the side of my thumb that's into these divots on each octave. If you have the thumb very flat, it's possible that you might contact rollers that you don't intend to. So when you're covering a lot of ground on the octaves, then I think the side of the thumb. When you're just playing, as you might do on a saxophone, on a sort of 2-octave range, then I find I can rest my thumb pretty much right over the top of one of the rollers and then slightly lean down or slightly roll back up. So it's quite a small movement. It's either down or up. And that will change registers for you, octaves for you, really nicely and smoothly. Of course, anyone will tell you your best practice on this is to try a few scales, and yes, we can do 7 or 8 octave scales on an EWI, so you better get used to them because it's by far the best practice you can do, particularly if you're a wind player already. Finally, just a couple of little things about the fingering. We don't have palm keys like we do on the left-hand side on a saxophone. You don't need them because you'll just switch up another octave. We do have little finger keys, and you might have noticed I've reconfigured these keys down here. We'll look at that in a later video. And on the left-hand side, you've got your little finger keys, which might feel hopefully a little familiar to you. What we don't have is the fork key in between, which I do miss a little bit myself. You've just got to play ordinary F sharp instead of that fingering we can do on the saxophone or clarinet with a fork key. And we just have the one side key here. Now, you'll be able to use that like a side B flat or a side key C. If you're a saxophonist, hopefully you'll know what that's doing there. And we do thankfully have what the saxophone player would call a biz or bis key, when we can put your index finger and hold it slightly over that little half moon shape key just below the B. So the most difficult thing is getting practicing on this thumb. So remember the 2 techniques there, play some scales and get out some of those early tutor books you had on the clarinet or the flute or the saxophone. Play some of those simple tunes, concentrating purely on just making a smooth transition between octaves. Plenty of scales, that's your best start off.